Commander Veltar stared at the data screen in his command center. His blue-scaled hands trembled as he read the report for the third time. The numbers made no sense. A species that had just learned to travel between stars had somehow defeated an entire Krex battle fleet. This was impossible. The war had been going on for 3 years now. The Krex Empire was winning on every front. They had better ships, better weapons, and they never showed mercy. Dozens of worlds had fallen to their advance. The Galactic Defense Coalition was losing badly, and everyone knew it. But now there was something new. Intelligence reports spoke of a species called humans from a small system named Sol. They had appeared out of nowhere and stopped a Krex invasion cold. The Krex fleet had retreated, something that had never happened before. Captain Jake Morrison walked onto the bridge of his ship, the UES Liberty. He was a tall man with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. His uniform was different from anything the aliens had seen before. It was simple, practical, and clean. Jake looked at the star map showing their destination. "Sir, we're approaching the Coalition base," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Mary Collins. She was young, maybe 25, with bright red hair tied back in a neat bun. "They're asking for our identification codes." Jake nodded. "Send them our diplomatic credentials. Tell them Earth is here to help." The Coalition had asked for Earth's help 3 months ago. The human government had agreed, but with conditions. They wanted to send their own people, their own ships, and their own way of doing things. The aliens had been desperate enough to agree. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the main briefing room of Kepler Station. She was a woman in her 40s with silver-streaked black hair and sharp blue eyes. Around her sat representatives from 12 different alien species. They all looked worried. "The situation is getting worse," said General Crixinol, a tall creature that looked like a walking tree. With 6 arms, his voice sounded like wind through leaves. "The Krex have taken 4 more systems this month. Our forces can't hold them back much longer." Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display. Red markers showed Krex positions advancing steadily toward Coalition space. Blue markers showed Coalition forces retreating on every front. It looked hopeless. "What about these humans?" asked Ambassador Zelfara, a being that resembled a giant butterfly with crystal wings. "The reports say they actually won a battle against the Krex." Murmurs went around the room. Nobody had won a battle against the Krex in over a year. The idea seemed impossible. "The humans are different," said General Crixinol. "Our scouts watch their battle. They don't fight like us. They don't think like us. When the Krex attacked their colony world, the humans did something strange." He activated a holographic display showing the battle. Ships moved across the starfield in recorded combat. The human ships were smaller than the Krex vessels, less advanced looking. "Watch what happens when the Krex target the civilian areas." Crixinol continued. The display showed Krex ships moving to attack cities full of non-combatants. This was normal Krex strategy. They always targeted civilians first to force quick surrenders. But the human response was not normal at all. Instead of pulling back their military ships to protect their fleet, the humans moved every available vessel to shield the civilian areas. They put their warships between the enemy and their people, even though it meant taking terrible damage. They protected civilians instead of military targets, whispered Ambassador Zelfara. "That's tactical suicide." But the recording showed something else. The human ships kept fighting even when badly damaged. They didn't retreat even when facing certain destruction. And somehow, impossibly, they had won. Captain Jake Morrison's ship docked with Kepler Station 6 hours later. He brought with him 50 of Earth's best military officers. They walked through the station corridors, and everyone stopped to stare. The humans looked so ordinary compared to the exotic aliens around them. No scales, No extra arms, no crystal. Wings. Just regular people in simple uniforms. Jake met Admiral Hayes in the command center. She was studying star charts with several alien officers. When Jake approached, she looked up and smiled. "Captain Morrison, I presume," she said, extending her hand. "Welcome to the front lines." Jake shook her hand. "Thank you, Admiral. Earth is ready to help however we can." General Crixinol approached them. His tree-like appearance towered over the humans, but Jake didn't seem intimidated. "Captain, we need to understand how you defeated the Krex. Our tacticians have studied the battle recordings, but your strategy makes no logical sense." Jake looked confused. "What do you mean? You sacrificed military advantage to protect civilians." Crixinol explained. "This should have resulted in total defeat. How did you win?" Jake exchanged glances with Admiral Hayes. "We didn't sacrifice anything, General. We did exactly what we were supposed to do. We protected our people." "But the tactical disadvantage," pressed Ambassador Zelfara. "You put your ships in harm's way for non-combatants. That's not efficient warfare." Jake's expression grew serious. "Ma'am, with respect, those aren't non-combatants. Those are our families, our friends, our neighbors. They're the reason we fight in the first place. What would be the point of winning a battle if we let them die?" The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. This human thinking was strange to them. In galactic warfare, civilian casualties were expected. Military forces protected strategic assets first, civilians second. It was logical, practical, and efficient. But humans seemed to have different priorities entirely. Admiral Hayes pulled up tactical displays of the current war situation. "Captain, we need to discuss Earth's role in this conflict. The Krex are advancing on 3 fronts. We estimate 6 months before they reach the core coalition worlds." Jake studied the displays carefully. "What's the civilian population in the threatened areas?" "Approximately 50 million, replied General Crixinol. "We have evacuation plans, but we can only save perhaps 30% before the Krex arrive." Jake's face went pale. 30%? What about the other 35 million people? "Acceptable." "Losses," said Crixinol matter-of-factly. "In warfare, some casualties are inevitable. We focus on saving what we can." The room fell silent. Jake looked around at the alien faces, seeing their calm acceptance of massive civilian deaths. Admiral Hayes watched his reaction carefully. "General," Jake said slowly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Earth didn't come here to help you win battles while 35 million people die. We came here to make sure everyone lives." "Ambassador." Zelfara fluttered her crystal wings nervously. "Captain, that's impossible. The numbers don't work. The logistics are impractical. The risk to military assets would be enormous." Jake looked directly at her. "Ma'am, I don't care about the numbers, or the logistics, or the risks. I care about people going home to their families when this is over. All of them." The alien stared at him in growing alarm. This human was talking about attempting something that violated every principle of rational warfare. He was suggesting they risk everything to save everyone. And somehow, terrifyingly, he seemed to believe it was possible. The planning room on Kepler Station had never seen anything like this before. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood at the head of a long table covered with papers, photos, and data tablets. But these weren't normal military documents. They were personal files. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster spread out hundreds of photographs across the table. Each picture showed a face, a name, and basic information. Children, elderly people, workers, families. The alien officers stared in confusion. "What is this?" asked General Crixinol, his tree-like form looming over the table. "Why do you have civilian identification records?" Amy looked up at him with serious brown eyes. She was a small woman, maybe 30 years old, but her voice carried absolute authority. These are the people we're going to save from Arcturus Station General. All 3 million of them. Commander Veltar's scales shifted from blue to purple, a sign of deep confusion among his species. Colonel, this is not how military planning works. You plan troop movements, supply lines, attack patterns. You don't catalog individual civilians. Amy picked up one of the photos. It showed an elderly alien couple holding hands. This is Mortek and his wife, Rilena. They've been married for 60 years. They run a small food shop on level 7 of Arcturus Station. They have 3 children and 8 grandchildren. She picked up another photo. This is young Piparex. She's only 6 years old. She likes to draw pictures of spaceships. Her parents work in the station's power plant. The alien officers exchanged worried glances. This human behavior was becoming disturbing. General Faxmer of the Hegemony Forces leaned forward. He was a massive creature covered in gray armor plating, a veteran of countless battles. Colonel Foster, you cannot possibly know details about 3 million individuals. This is inefficient. Wars are about numbers, not names. Amy looked directly at him. General, when you plan a battle, what do you calculate first? Acceptable. Casualty rates, Faxner replied immediately. Standard military doctrine calls for casualty projections of 15 to 30%, depending on enemy strength and terrain advantages. And how do you choose which 15 to 30%? Will die? Faxner paused. The question didn't make sense to him. You don't choose. Casualties are random. Some live, some die. That's war. Amy gathered up the photographs and held them against her chest. General, I want you to pick out 450,000 of these pictures. I want you to tell me which of these people you think should die so the rest can live. The room fell completely silent. Even the humming of the station's life support systems seemed too loud. Captain Jake Morrison entered the planning room carrying a large case. Behind him walked Engineer Captain Ben Rodriguez, a stocky man with calloused hands and bright, intelligent eyes. Ben set down his own case and opened it, revealing detailed construction blueprints. What's the status on mobile medical units? Jake asked Amy. We've got 47 hospital ships standing by, she replied. Each one can handle 500 critical patients. Nurse Commander Janet Price has organized medical teams from 6 different species. Ben spread out his blueprints on the table next to Amy's photographs. I've designed portable emergency shelters that can be deployed in under 10 minutes. Each shelter houses 200 people and includes basic life support, food preparation, and communication equipment. Ambassador Zelfara fluttered her crystal wings nervously. Captain Rodriguez, why are you building shelters? This is supposed to be a military rescue operation, not a construction project. Ben looked at her as if she had asked why spaceships needed engines. Ma'am, we're evacuating 3 million people from a war zone. They're going to need somewhere safe to stay while we get them to permanent housing. We can't just pull them out of danger and leave them floating in space. General Crixenel studied Ben's blueprints with growing alarm. These shelters are designed to be completely self-sufficient. You're planning to build temporary cities. Yes, sir, Ben replied. Complete with schools for the children, workshops for people who want to stay busy, recreational areas, and medical facilities. People might be displaced for weeks or months. They deserve to live with dignity while we sort things out. Commander. Veltar's scales had turned completely purple now. This is madness. You're using military resources to provide comfort services. Wars cannot be fought this way. Captain Morrison sat down at the table. Commander, help me understand something. When your people plan a military operation, what's the primary objective? Victory over enemy forces, Veltar replied immediately. And what does victory look like? Tactical superiority, control of strategic assets, elimination of enemy capability to resist. Jake nodded thoughtfully. Those are good objectives, Commander. But they're not our primary objective. Then what is? Jake picked up one of Amy's photographs. It showed a family of 4 aliens standing in front of what looked like their home. Our primary objective is making sure this family has dinner together next month. And that family over there gets to celebrate their daughter's birthday next week. And those elderly people get to see their grandchildren grow up. General Faxmar's armor plates shifted, a sign of agitation. Captain Morrison, those are not military objectives. Those are emotional responses. War cannot be fought based on feelings. Amy Foster stepped forward. General, you're wrong. War should always be fought based on feelings. The feeling that every life matters. The feeling that no one gets left behind. The feeling that some things are worth any risk. She turned to address all the alien officers. You keep talking about acceptable losses and efficient tactics and logical strategy. But you're missing the most important point. Those 3 million people on Arcturus Station aren't statistics to be calculated. They're the reason we fight. Sergeant. Kate Hughes entered the room carrying a data tablet. She was young, maybe 22, with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes. Colonel Foster, I've finished analyzing the Krex communication intercepts. Amy took the tablet and read quickly. Her face grew pale, then flushed with anger. Jake, you need to see this. Captain Morrison read the intelligence report. His jaw tightened. Ben, Amy, we need to talk privately. The 3 humans stepped to one corner of the room. Jake showed Ben and Amy the report. Ben cursed under his breath. Amy's hands shook with rage. What is it? Asked General Crixino. What did your intelligence discover? Jake returned to the table, his face grim. The Krex aren't just conquering territory. They're harvesting populations. The civilians they capture aren't prisoners of war. They're being processed for biological materials. The alien officers looked confused. Processed how? Asked Commander Veltar. Amy Foster's voice was deadly quiet. They're being used as raw materials for genetic experiments. The Krex are literally farming sentient beings. The room erupted in shocked voices. Even these battle-hardened alien military leaders had never encountered anything so horrific. General, Faxmar's armor plates clattered together in distress. This changes nothing tactically. The rescue operation is still impossible. The numbers don't work. Jake Morrison stood up slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried a cold fury that made every alien in the room step back. General, I need you to understand something. We just learned that the enemy is committing genocide on an industrial scale. You're telling me that saving 3 million people from that fate is impossible because the numbers don't work. He walked around the table, looking each alien officer in the eye. Here's what you don't understand about humans, General. When someone tells us that saving innocent lives is impossible, we don't accept that. We change the math. Amy gathered up her photographs and blueprints. Ben collected his construction plans. Sergeant Hughes organized her intelligence files. Where? Are you going? Asked Ambassador Zell FARA. Jake Morrison headed for the door. We're going to save everyone. All 3 million. Every single one. The aliens watched them leave in stunned silence. What the humans were planning violated every principle of rational warfare, and that's exactly what made them so terrifying. The human fleet that approached Arcturus Station looked nothing like any military force the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Rick Palmer stood on the bridge of the UES Constitution, watching dozens of ships move into formation around him. Half of them were painted white, with large red crosses on their hulls. "Admiral Hayes, this is Palmer," he spoke into his communicator. "Medical fleet is in position. Hospital ships Newton, Franklin, and Adams are ready to receive casualties. Mobile surgical units are standing by." Rick was a calm man in his 30s, with steady hands and gray eyes that missed nothing. He had commanded warships before, but never anything like this. His flagship had been converted from a battleship into a floating medical center. Where weapons once sat, there were now operating rooms and recovery wards. General Crixnell watched the human fleet through his observatory on Kepler Station. His tree-like form swayed with confusion. They're approaching a war zone with hospital ships in the front. This is tactical insanity. Ambassador Zelfara fluttered her crystal wings nervously beside him. Perhaps they don't understand the danger. Should we warn them that the Krex will target medical vessels first? Commander Veltar's scales shifted to deep purple. They know. I sent them complete intelligence on Krex battle tactics. They're doing this on purpose. The Krex fleet surrounding Arcturus Station detected the approaching humans and moved to intercept. Admiral Zexkar, the Krex commander, studied the sensor readings with predatory satisfaction. These foolish humans were making his job easy by leading with defenseless medical ships. But something strange happened when the Krex opened fire. The human hospital ships didn't retreat or scatter as expected. Instead, they broadcast on all emergency frequencies, offering medical assistance to anyone who needed it, including the Krex. Medical Vessel Newton calling all ships in distress. Came the calm voice of Dr. Helen Carter over the communication channels. "We have surgical teams standing by and can provide immediate treatment for combat injuries. No questions asked." Admiral Zexkar paused. In 3 years of war, no enemy had ever offered to treat Krex wounded. This was unprecedented. Marine Colonel Susan Wright led the first landing teams down to Arcturus Station. She was a tough woman with short dark hair and scars on her hands from previous battles. But her Marines weren't carrying just weapons and ammunition. Each soldier had medical supplies, emergency food, and communication devices to help coordinate civilian evacuations. "Squad leaders, remember the mission," Susan spoke into her helmet radio. "Primary objective is civilian safety. We're not here to hold territory. We're here to get people out alive." Sergeant Danny Lopez crouched behind cover in one of the station's main corridors. Enemy fire sparked off the walls around him, but he wasn't shooting back. Instead, he was helping an injured alien civilian apply pressure to a bleeding wound. "Ma'am, can you tell me your name?" Danny asked gently while wrapping a bandage around the alien's arm. She was a blue-scaled being, probably Zephyrian, and she was crying. "Milra," she whispered. "My children. They're in the school section. Level 12. Please." Danny helped her to her feet and guided her toward the evacuation point. "Don't worry, Milra. We've got teams heading to level 12 right now. We're going to find your children." This same scene was playing out all over Arcturus Station. Human Marines advanced not to capture strategic positions, but to create safe corridors for fleeing civilians. They moved slowly, methodically, making sure no one was left behind. Captain Ben Rodriguez's engineering teams were performing miracles throughout the station. Where the Krex had destroyed life support systems, Ben's people were installing portable units. Where corridors had been blasted shut, they were cutting new passages. Where power had failed, they were running emergency cables. Rodriguez to all engineering teams. Ben spoke into his radio while welding a support beam. "Remember, we're not just fixing damage. We're improving on the original design. These people deserve better than what they had before." The alien observers couldn't understand what they were seeing. Engineer Pete Johnson was installing a more efficient air recycling system in a damaged section. Technician Carol Adams was upgrading the school's computer network while evacuating children. Specialist Frank Miller was building a playground in one of the refugee areas. General Faxmer watched the battle reports with growing confusion. They're not fighting a war, they're renovating the station. But the most confusing thing was how the Kreks were reacting. Their entire battle plan had assumed the humans would choose between military objectives and civilian protection, when forced. To make that choice, most species would eventually prioritize military goals. The humans refused to make the choice at all. When Krek's forces attacked the station's power plant, expecting the humans to choose between defending it and protecting. The nearby residential areas, the humans defended both simultaneously. When the Kreks targeted the communication array, thinking the humans would prioritize military communications over civilian evacuation coordination, the humans treated both as equally important. Admiral Zexkar found his carefully planned strategy falling apart. Every Krek's tactic was designed to force the enemy into impossible decisions. But the humans seemed incapable of accepting that any decision was impossible. Sergeant Kate Hughes had discovered something important in the Krek's communication intercepts. She found Captain Palmer in the makeshift command center that had been set up in the station's old cafeteria. "Sir, I've been monitoring enemy communications," Kate reported. "The Krek's commanders are arguing among themselves. They can't understand our tactics." Rick looked up from a map showing evacuation routes. "What kind of arguments?" Kate pulled up the translated messages on her data tablet. "They keep asking each other why we're not following standard military doctrine. Admiral Zexkar has requested reinforcements 3 times, but his superiors keep telling him to handle it with existing forces. Why won't they send reinforcements? Because according to their strategic models, they should have won already. Our behavior doesn't fit any of their tactical databases." Captain Palmer smiled grimly. "Good. Let's keep confusing them." The breakthrough came when Dr. Helen Carter's medical teams did something that shattered Krek's morale completely. A damaged Krek's fighter had crash-landed near the station, and its pilot was badly injured. Standard procedure would be to capture the pilot for interrogation. Instead, Dr. Carter personally operated on the Krek's pilot, saving his life. "Why?" the pilot asked weakly when he woke up in the human medical bay. "I am your enemy." Dr. Carter, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gentle hands, checked his bandages carefully. "You're hurt," she said simply. "I'm a doctor. It's my job to help hurt people." The pilot stared at her. "But I was trying to kill your people." "That was yesterday," Helen replied. "Today, you're my patient. Would you like me to contact your family and tell them you're safe?" Word of this spread through the Krek's fleet faster than their commanders could control it. Human forces were treating captured Krek soldiers better than the Kreks treated their own wounded. Admiral Zexkar received reports that some of his own crews were refusing to fire on human medical ships. This had never happened in Krek's military history. Colonel Susan Wright's Marines had cleared the last of the residential sections when they made an unexpected discovery. Hidden in the lower levels of the station were thousands of prisoners that the Kreks had been planning to harvest. These weren't just coalition civilians, but people from dozens of different species, including some the humans had never seen before. "Palmer, this is right," Susan reported. "We found approximately 12,000 additional people in the detention levels. They're in bad shape, but they're alive." Rick felt his stomach tighten. The evacuation plan had been designed for 3 million people. Now they had 15,000 more, all needing immediate medical attention. "Understood, Colonel. Dr. Carter is preparing additional medical facilities. We'll make room for everyone." General Crixenel, monitoring the operation from Kepler Station, calculated the new numbers with alarm. "Captain Palmer, this exceeds your evacuation capacity by 400%. You need to prioritize. Save who you can." Rick Palmer's voice came back clear and determined. General, I'm going to need you to explain to me which 12,000 people you think we should leave behind to die. The alien officers fell silent. They were beginning to understand something terrible about human mathematics. When humans said they would save everyone, they meant everyone, even when it was impossible, even when it meant changing the very nature of war itself. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the command center of the U.S. Constitution, looking at numbers that should have meant disaster. The evacuation of Arcturus Station was supposed to save 3 million people. They had found 15,000 more prisoners. In the lower levels, medical reports showed that 40% of the rescued prisoners needed immediate surgery to survive. By every rule of military logistics, this mission had become impossible. Admiral Hayes picked up her communicator and spoke. To the fleet. All ships, this is Hayes. We have a problem. The communication channel filled with voices from dozens of ships. Captain Palmer from the Constitution, Colonel Wright from the Marine Transports, Dr. Carter from the medical vessels, Engineer, Rodriguez from the construction ships. What's the situation, Admiral? Asked Captain Palmer. We're looking at over 3 million people to evacuate, plus 15,000 prisoners who need intensive medical care. Our original plan assumed we could move people to temporary shelters and transport them in groups. These prisoners can't wait for groups. They need help now. General Faxmar's voice came through from Kepler Station. Admiral Hayes, I'm transmitting. Revised casualty projections. With the additional prisoners, you're looking at acceptable losses of 60 to 70%. I recommend prioritizing the healthiest civilians and abandoning the prison levels. The communication channel went completely silent. Dr. Helen Carter was the first to speak. Her voice was quiet but firm. General, I need you to repeat that. Last part. I said you should abandon the prisoners. Focus on saving who you can. General, you want me to look at 15,000 sick and injured people and decide which ones don't deserve medical treatment? Doctor, this is war. Some choices are necessary for the greater good. Admiral Hayes closed her eyes. She had been in the military for 20 years. She had made hard choices before, but something about General Faxmar's words made her feel sick. General, she said slowly, I want you to do something for me. I want you to pick one person. Anyone. Your child, your parent, your best friend. Someone you care about. Admiral, I don't see how this is relevant. Just pick someone, General. There was a pause. Very well. My offspring, Faxville. Good. Now I want you to imagine that Faxville is trapped somewhere, hurt and scared and waiting for rescue. And I want you to imagine that someone with the power to save him looks at a report and decides that saving Faxville isn't worth the trouble, that Faxville is an acceptable loss. General Faxmore's armor plates clattered together. That's different. That's personal. No, General. That's exactly the same. Every one of those 15,000 prisoners is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's best friend. The only difference is that you don't know their names. Engineer Ben Rodriguez spoke up from his position near the station's power core. Admiral, I've been running calculations. If we modify the evacuation ships and extend the rescue timeline by 6 hours, we can accommodate everyone. What kind of modifications? Asked Captain Palmer. We strip out non-essential systems from the transport ships and replace them with basic life support pods. We also build temporary medical facilities on every ship, not just the hospital vessels. Colonel Susan Wright joined the conversation from the Marine Command post. Ben, extending the timeline means staying in the combat zone longer. The Krex reinforcements will arrive before we finish. Then we deal with the Krex reinforcements, said Admiral Hayes simply. Ambassador Zilfara's voice fluttered through the communication system from Kepler Station. Admiral Hayes, you're talking about fighting a battle while simultaneously conducting a massive humanitarian operation. This has never been attempted before. Ma'am, a lot of things we do have never been attempted before. Commander Veltar's scales had turned completely purple with stress. Admiral, your proposed course of action has a projected casualty rate of 90% for human forces. You're essentially committing suicide to save people you've never met. Admiral Hayes looked around the bridge of her ship. Her crew members were listening to every word. Lieutenant Mary Collins at Communications, Ensign Tom Bradley at Navigation, Chief Petty Officer Sarah Kim at Tactical Systems. These people would follow her orders even if those orders meant their deaths. Commander Veltar, can I ask you something? Yes. Admiral, when you look at those 15,000 prisoners, what do you see? I see a logistical problem. Additional complications that threaten mission success. When I look at them, I see 15,000 people who are going home to their families. Sergeant Kate Hughes had been monitoring Krex communications throughout this conversation. Now she spoke up with excitement in her voice. Admiral, you need to hear this. The Krex fleet is receiving new orders from their high command. What kind of orders, Sergeant? Admiral Zexkar is being relieved of command. The Krex High Command is sending a new fleet commander, Admiral Vorthik. According to their communications, Vorthik has never lost a battle. Captain Palmer studied the tactical displays. How long before this new commander arrives? 4 hours. Sir, Admiral Hayes made her decision. All ships, this is Hayes. We're staying until everyone is evacuated. Every single person. We'll deal with Admiral Vorthik when he gets here. Dr. Carter spoke from the medical bay where she was treating rescued prisoners. Admiral, some of these people have been held by the Krex for months. They're not just physically injured. They're terrified. They've given up hope. What do you need, Doctor? Time and safety. These people need to believe they're really being rescued, not just moved to a different prison. Admiral Hayes understood. Doctor, you have my word. No one gets left behind. No one gets forgotten. Everyone goes home. Engineer Rodriguez had been working on ship modifications while listening to the conversation. Admiral, I have an idea that might help with the Krex problem. I'm listening, Ben. What if we don't fight them the way they expect? What if we use their own tactics against them? Explain. The Krex always attack civilian targets to force military responses. What if we make Admiral Vorthik choose between attacking us and protecting his own people? Admiral Hayes frowned. Ben, we don't have any Krex civilians to threaten. No, but we have something better. We have injured Krex soldiers that Dr. Carter has been treating. What if we invite Admiral Vorthik to come get his own people? The communication channel fell silent as everyone considered this idea. Dr. Carter spoke first. Are you suggesting we use prisoners as leverage? No, said Ben quickly. I'm suggesting we offer to return healthy, well-treated Krex soldiers to their fleet. No strings attached. No demands. Just medical care and safe passage home. General. Thaxnor's voice carried confusion. Engineer Rodriguez, that's not how prisoner exchanges work. You use prisoners to negotiate advantages. General, we're not negotiating. We're just being decent. Sergeant Hughes had been translating more Krex communications. Admiral, I'm picking up chatter about the prisoners we're treating. Word is spreading through the Krex fleet that we're actually healing their wounded instead of interrogating them. Admiral Hayes smiled grimly. Good, let it spread. Ma'am, some of the Krex ships are requesting permission to approach under medical flags. They want to retrieve their wounded. Grant permission. Dr. Carter, prepare to transfer any Krex patients who are stable enough to move. Commander Veltar's voice was high with panic. Admiral Hayes, you're releasing valuable intelligence assets. This goes against every principle of military science. Admiral Hayes looked out at the stars where Krek ships were beginning to approach under medical flags. Ships that had been trying to kill them hours ago were now coming to retrieve their wounded. Commander, military science says we should have abandoned those 15,000 prisoners. Military science says we should accept acceptable losses. Military science says we should make smart tactical choices. She paused, watching the first Krek's medical transport dock with their hospital ship. Military science has never met humans before. We don't do smart tactical choices. We do the right thing, even when it's impossible. The Krek's fleet was beginning to look very different. Ships that had been in attack formation were now spreading out, some coming to collect wounded, others pulling back to avoid interfering with medical operations. Admiral Vorthek, approaching in his command ship, found himself facing something unprecedented in Krek's military history. An enemy that treated prisoners better than the Kreks treated their own soldiers. Not an enemy that was more concerned with saving lives than winning battles. Not an enemy that had turned a war zone into a rescue operation. Admiral Hayes prepared for the arrival of the most dangerous Krek's commander in their fleet. But she wasn't preparing for a battle. She was preparing to save everyone. Admiral Vorthek arrived at Arcturus Station, expecting to find a standard military engagement. He was the most feared commander in the Krek's fleet, a tactician who had never lost a battle in 20 years of war. His massive command ship, the Death's Edge, moved into position with deadly precision. But what he found made no sense at all. The human fleet was spread out in what looked like a protective formation around Arcturus Station. But they weren't positioned for defense. They were positioned to provide maximum coverage for evacuation ships, moving back and forth between the station and a growing collection of temporary shelters. Communications officer, Vorthek growled to his subordinate. What is the status of our captured forces? Sir, this is unusual. The humans are requesting permission to return 37 of our wounded personnel. They say the wounded have received full medical treatment and are ready for transfer. Vorthek's claws extended in confusion. They want to give back our soldiers? Yes, sir. No demands, no negotiations. They're just asking when we want to pick them up. This violated every rule of warfare that Vorthek understood. Prisoners were valuable. You used them for information, for bargaining, for psychological pressure. You didn't heal them and send them home. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the UE Constitution, watching the massive Krek's command ship approach. She knew Vorthek's reputation. He was brilliant, ruthless, and had destroyed entire star systems to achieve victory. Admiral, reported Lieutenant Mary Collins from Communications, the Krek's commander is requesting a direct channel. Put him through. The view screen activated, showing Vorthek in his command chair. He was larger than most Kreks, with battle scars across his armored hide and cold yellow eyes that had seen countless victories. I am Admiral Vorthek of the Krek's Empire, he said in heavily accented Standard. You will surrender immediately, or face annihilation. Admiral Hayes looked back at him calmly. Admiral Vorthek, I'm Admiral Hayes of the Earth Defense Fleet. Before we discuss surrender, would you like to collect your wounded personnel? Our medical teams have been taking good care of them. Vorthek paused. This was not how these conversations usually went. You wish to negotiate prisoner exchange? No negotiation needed, Hayes replied. They're injured. We treated them. Now they're ready to go home. Dr. Carter says most of them will make full recoveries. Behind Vorthek, his bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. In 20 years of commanding Krek's forces, Vorthek had never heard an enemy offer to return prisoners for free. What do you want in exchange? He asked suspiciously. Nothing. They're hurt people who need to go home to their families. That's enough reason. Vorthik studied the human admiral's face carefully. She seemed to mean it. This was either an incredibly clever trap, or the humans were genuinely insane. "Very well," he said finally. "Send over our personnel. Then you will surrender." "We'll send your people right over," Hayes agreed. "But we're not surrendering until everyone is evacuated from Arcturus Station." Captain Rick Palmer supervised the transfer of Krek's prisoners to Admiral Vorthik's ships. Each returning soldier had been fully healed, fed, and given clean uniforms. Dr. Carter personally checked each one before they left. The first returning Krek soldier was Sub-Commander Krelinix. He had been critically injured when his fighter crashed, but now he stood straight and healthy. When he reached the Krek's transport, his own officers barely recognized him. "Sub-Commander," asked his captain, "what did the humans do to you?" Krelinix looked confused by the question. "They saved my life, sir. The human doctor worked for 6 hours to repair my internal injuries. She said I reminded her of her own son." "Did they interrogate you?" "No, sir. They asked if I wanted to send a message to my family telling them I was safe." Similar conversations were happening throughout the Krek's fleet as returned soldiers told. Stories that their commanders couldn't believe. Humans sharing their own food with prisoners. Human engineers fixing damaged Krek's equipment just to be helpful. Human soldiers playing games with young Krek's crew members who were homesick. Admiral Vorthik received these reports with growing confusion. Either his entire fleet was lying to him, or the humans were fighting a war unlike anything in Galactic history. Colonel Susan Wright's Marines had completed the evacuation of all residential areas of Arcturus Station. The last transport ships were loading the final groups of civilians when her radio crackled with an urgent message. "Colonel Wright, this is Sergeant Hughes. I found something in the intelligence files that changes everything." "What is it, Sergeant?" "Ma'am, I've been analyzing 3 years of Krek's battle records. The reason they always win isn't because they have better weapons or tactics. It's because they force their enemies to make impossible choices." Susan frowned. "Explain." "Every Krek strategy is designed to make the enemy choose between saving military assets and saving civilian lives. They attack civilian targets to force military responses, then destroy the military forces while they're trying to protect non-combatants. And that works because every species eventually decides that some people are acceptable losses. The Kreks wait for that moment, then exploit it. Colonel Wright understood immediately, but we never make that choice." "Exactly, ma'am. We protect everyone, so their strategy doesn't work." This intelligence reached Admiral Hayes just as Admiral Vorthik was preparing his final attack. The Krek's commander had studied human tactics and found them incomprehensible, but he was confident that overwhelming force would eventually break their strange determination. "Admiral Vorthik," Hayes said over the communication channel, "I have a question for you. Ask quickly, human. This battle begins in 1 minute. In 3 years of war, how many battles have you won by forcing the enemy to abandon their civilians?" Vorthik paused. The question was oddly specific. All of them. "Civilian protection always weakens military response. What happens to your strategy when the enemy refuses to abandon anyone?" "That is impossible. All species eventually accept losses." Admiral Hayes smiled sadly. "Admiral, you've never fought humans before. We don't accept losses. We change the rules." The final phase of the evacuation was beginning. Engineer Ben Rodriguez had converted every available transport into an evacuation vessel. Dr. Carter had set up medical facilities on cargo ships. Captain Palmer had organized a convoy that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. But most importantly, every single person who had been trapped on Arcturus Station was accounted for. All 3 million civilians. All 15,000 prisoners from the detention levels. Even the injured Krek soldiers had been safely returned to their fleet. "Admiral," Vorthik watched this massive evacuation with growing disbelief. The humans had actually done it. They had saved everyone. His tactical computer calculated the human casualties from this operation. According to every military model the Krex had developed, the humans should have lost 60 to 70% of their forces attempting something this impossible. The actual human casualties were 12%, lower than most successful military operations. How? Vorthik asked Admiral Hayes over the communication channel. How what, Admiral? How did you save everyone with so few losses? Hayes looked at the evacuation convoy, ships filled with 3 million people heading to safety. When you fight to save lives instead of fighting to win battles, you make different choices, better choices. Admiral Vorthik made a decision that would change galactic military history. Instead of attacking the evacuation convoy, he ordered his fleet to stand down. Admiral Hayes, he said formally, the Krex Empire acknowledges your victory at Arcturus Station. This wasn't about victory, Admiral. This was about people going home. 6 months later, when Krex forces encountered human units anywhere in Coalition space, they surrendered rather than fight. Word had spread throughout the Krex Empire about armies that fought to save everyone, even their enemies. The galaxy's military academies began teaching courses on human warfare theory, though few alien tacticians could understand how an army that prioritized individual lives over strategic objectives could be so devastatingly effective. Colonel Wright filed her final report on the Arcturus operation. It was simple and direct. Mission accomplished. All personnel evacuated safely. No acceptable losses incurred. Recommend this approach for all future operations. General Thaxmer read the report with amazement. According to everything he understood about warfare, what the humans had accomplished was impossible. But the numbers didn't lie. Captain Palmer summed up the human approach in his own report. We didn't come here to win a war. We came here to make sure everyone gets to go home. Turns out, when you fight for that goal, winning the war takes care of itself. The most frightening thing about human armies wasn't their weapons, or their courage, or their technology. It was their absolute refusal to accept that anyone should be left behind. And once the galaxy learned that lesson, war itself began to change forever.